is my song, giving the spirit fullest control.
I'm Mike Costello, and I'd like to talk to you in the next few minutes about impatience. We all deal with impatience, and it keeps us from the peace and the tranquility that we all want in life. We seem to always want what we want right now and immediately. All of us can relate to taking a child on a trip and having him or her say, "How long till we get there? How long till we get there?" And they begin that process from the time we leave the door until we get where we're going. Many of us in adult life don't go that far, but in fact, in many circumstances and situations of our lives, we are tremendously, tremendously impatient. And as we embrace impatience, we disconnect or alienate ourselves from the natural order and flow of life. Impatience cuts us off from peace and balance and centering. In New Thought metaphysical philosophy, we believe that we live in our minds and not in the world. That means that the way that we think, the way that we direct our thought process, lays out for us the quality of our life. If you are always impatient, if you are always moving at breakneck speed, if you are always expecting and unhappy because things haven't happened as fast and as rapidly and as timely as you wanted them, you have detached yourself from peace and tranquility, and you have attached yourself to stress and conflict and difficulty. And that stress and conflict and difficulty translates into your life, into your way of thinking, and is projected out to all of those around you. I was reminded of how important patience is and how impatience can rob us of peace and tranquility recently when I visited a grocery store. I had worked all day and it was rather late, and I had decided to stop by the grocery store and pick up a few things that I wanted. And I was very peaceful. I was very happy. I was in a very good mood. And I got out of my car and went into the grocery store, and I knew exactly what I wanted. There were specific things that I wanted for dinner that night. So I got the basket and I went to the aisles where I needed to go, and I got just what I needed and moved through the store effortlessly without any problem and was peaceful and happy and centered. And then I went to the check stand. And when I got to the check stand, there were 6 or 8 check stands lined out with all kinds of people. And so I got in line. And as I got in line, I was not aware and as conscious as I needed to be about how it is my mind was reacting and responding to the circumstance and situation. And so I began to watch the checkers. And the checker in the line where I was moving through her tasks in a very methodical way. Nothing wrong with that, but I began to get irritated that she wasn't moving more quickly. Whether she moved more quickly or not was none of my business. What was happening was my thought process was changing. I was at peace. I was happy. I was satisfied. I was directed and I was guided when I came into the grocery store. But now I was beginning to let circumstances and situations control and change and manipulate the way I was thinking. I then began to think about or began to observe the box person who was boxing up the things or bagging up the things. And the box person was talking to another box person. And they were doing more talking than boxing. And I began this process of negative thinking. I began to think negatively about the clerk. I began to think negatively about the box person. I began to think negatively about the grocery store. And in reality, what was going on in my mind was what was determining how I was feeling and was determining whether or not I was peaceful and happy and whether or not I got done what I needed to get done. What I needed to get done was to get my food for dinner. And in order to do that, I had to stop at the store. I had to get out of my car. I had to go into the grocery store. I had to pick up the items, and I had to go through the checkout line. All of those things are necessary, and all of those things were equally necessary. But because I allowed negativity to creep into my thought process, I began to rob myself of peace and tranquility and happiness. A number of years ago, I saw a sign that said, "Give me patience right now." And that's what we want so often. We want to be patient, but we want to be patient right now. We want what we want right now. And in our society, we move so rapidly and so fast. We want the best job right now. We want the car that we want right now. We want peace right now. We want spiritual awareness right now. We don't necessarily open ourselves to being patient and allowing the process of unfoldment to take place. The process of unfoldment for getting my dinner required that I do certain things to get that food. I was doing those things, but in the midst of doing them, I allowed the circumstance and situation to take control of my life, to take control of my mind, and to alter the way that I was feeling. When I was a child, I was raised by my grandparents, and we had a crank machine that made ice cream. And we did it infrequently. It was usually when we had a barbecue or when there was an outside activity in the yard or on the patio. And we would put the ingredients in this machine and crank and crank and crank. And different people would take turns in this process. And the process was so wonderful because it created time for us to be together as a family. It allowed us time to connect with each other. It allowed us to share in the process of making the ice cream. And then when the ice cream was ready, we were able to have it. And today, instead of ice cream machines, and I'm not suggesting that we should always have ice cream from ice cream machines, but we have Baskin-Robbins or other points where we can simply go and get the ice cream and eat it quickly. And in the process, the eating of the ice cream, the experience of the ice cream is different, far different than it was or is when we connect with other people. My experience at the grocery store was far different than it would be if I had sat or stood in the line and watched the clerk and sent to her the power and the grace of God, sent to her thankfulness for the fact that she was there doing what she was doing to help all of us get our food, sending strength and happiness to those box persons, knowing that they were dealing with interactions between themselves and sending them blessings and sending them life and sending them love. In New Thought, we talk very often about the Christ in me saluting the Christ in you, or I behold the Christ in you. And that is a challenge whereby we see the power of God. We see the presence of the indwelling Christ in everyone around us. And in order to do that, we need to have a patience, and we need to be willing to give up our impatience about all things, our impatience about life, our impatience about spiritual growth, our impatience about attaining things on our time frame. And we need to know that we will attain what we need to attain. We will be guided and directed by God's infinite intelligence in God's time. And God's time doesn't have to do with a clock, and it doesn't have to do with a day or a week. It has to do with the right time for you and for me. I was recently given the task from our church to take our newsletter to the printer. And I had gotten into my car early in the morning about 8:30, and I'd gone to the printer, and I believed that the printer opened at 8:30, but the printer didn't open until 9. And so there I was in the parking lot of this strip shopping center at 20 minutes to 9, unable to get into the print shop, knowing that I had to go to the print shop before I went on to my other job and work that I had to accomplish. And so I was a little bit annoyed. So I sat in the car and contemplated what it was I needed to do. Should I just forget it and bring the newsletter back to the church and let one of the volunteers or secretaries take care of it? Should I wait? Should I take it to another printer? What should I do? And as I was sitting there in the midst of my impatience, because I believed I had more important things to do, more difficult things to do, more pressing things to do, I began to notice that the parking lot was kind of coming alive, that there was a computer store, and the computer store people, the workers had arrived, and they were unlocking the door and turning on the lights and opening the door. The printer had arrived, but hadn't opened the store yet and was inside kind of turning on the lights and getting ready. There was a lot of activity going on. And as I sat in the parking lot, I also became aware of all the cars that were going up and down the street. And it was 10 minutes to 9 by now, and I was thinking, all of these people have a place to go. Everybody's job and everybody's need is important. And my need is no more or less important, but if I would stay patient, if I would deal with the reality that I came early. It wasn't that the printer did anything wrong, I came early. And so I needed to accept the fact that I had some options, and I needed to embrace the philosophy and the idea of patience. And so I began about 5 minutes to 9, deciding that I'll wait until the printer opens his doors, which would be about 5 minutes. And what a wonderful opportunity I had for 5 minutes or so to just enter into a time of meditation and pray for all of those who were in their cars going places, for all of those shopkeepers that were opening their stores, that their stores would be prosperous in that day, that they would be happy, that there would be peace and safety for everyone around us. In the midst of that time of meditation, a siren went by, and I didn't open my eyes. I don't know whether it was a policeman or an ambulance or a fire truck, but I simply entered into a time of prayer because I knew that that siren meant that there was a need. and I sent and directed the power and presence of God to that need. When I opened my eyes, it was 10 minutes after 9, and I'd spent 15 minutes in that wonderful time of prayer and communion. And it didn't really matter that at 10 minutes after 9, I went into the print shop and took care of my business, and I was a little late getting to my office. Really, what was important was that I center myself in patience, that I am willing to give to myself and to life and to others around me patience, and not allow impatience to rob me of the peace and tranquility that I need. God's time is not our time. Answers come not in minutes or years, but when the time is right. And the time will always be right if we open ourselves to patience and understanding and the realization that God's timing is perfect in every circumstance and situation. We believe in prayer and meditation. We believe that prayer is useful in centering and bringing peace and healing. So we would like to invite you to pause at this point in the program for a moment of reflection. Eternal and loving God, we gather our hearts and minds together in the reality that all of us deal with stresses in life and that all of us are impatient. But we know that as we embrace your divine presence, that we can become patient persons, that we can embrace your timing, which is perfect timing, and we can give up the need that we have to control our lives and the lives of others. We know and pray these things in the name of faith, in the name of hope, in the name of love. Amen.
I loved your stories, and especially the one about when you learned patience, because I'm sure you've been patient many times. I think of you as being the most patient person I know, so it surprises me that you would have been that impatient. But that was a very learning and wonderful experience and transforming, that you were able to, in both cases, in your own experience, transmute the impatience into good.
Absolutely, and I appreciate your saying that I'm a patient person. I think most people who know me believe me to be extremely patient, and I am. But I, like everyone, do have times when impatience comes in, and when it comes in and it destroys.
Yes.
And so I'm very thankful that because of the realities of the teaching and truth study that we understand, that I am a patient person. But when those times of impatience come, I'm reminded of the need to center myself. I had another experience that was another kind of story, and that was we're all accustomed today with voicemail and telephone machines and all of that and being put on hold. And a couple of months ago, I was making several business calls, and I had to contact a number of people. And I either got voicemail, or I got put on hold, or I got this, or I got that. And of course, the other thing is that so often when we're put on hold or voicemail, we get a little advertisement, from the place. And I found myself getting angry about the fact that here technology is supposed to help and it's not helping. And then I caught myself, and this is something that anyone can do, and we need to do it. We need to catch ourselves. And I caught myself and I thought, now, why am I letting this situation control the way that I feel? I am centered and peaceful. I'm always centered and peaceful, and I'm giving up that centering and that peacefulness because I'm getting impatient. And so what can I do? And so I took the same tack that I took at the print shop, which maybe takes more time away, but I thought, what a wonderful thing while I'm on hold. What if I start meditating and praying every time I'm put on hold? Every time, all the time. And I've done that now since that period of time. Well, I get put on hold a lot, like many people do. And it's really a tremendous opportunity to say a little prayer, to enter into a time. Sometimes it's a prayer, sometimes it's a little silent meditation, sometimes it's remembering a need that somebody had. And that time would be spent making me angry. And changing the way that I think. And we need to be vigilant about that.
Yes, that's a very wonderful lesson for our audience to have, to transmute their impatience into productivity, which is what you've been doing. You were talking about the ice cream being made at your grandparents' home, and I remember during my childhood we had ice cream. We made ice cream all the time, and when my mother was ill, and I was like in my late 30s, 40s, early 40s, my mother was terminally ill, and nothing made her laugh because very little made her laugh because she was so uncomfortable with cancer. And one time we decided to make homemade ice cream like we used to do when we were children. So I was in charge of turning the crank to make the ice cream. So I always had the habit of reading. All my life I was a reader, and they made fun of me as I grew up because whatever I did, I had a book in my hand. So I had a book in my hand when I was turning the crank when my mother was there in her bed, and she could see me out on the porch doing the ice cream. And so I did that for a long, 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 long time. And then I said, Mother, something's wrong. We've done something wrong because it's not getting hard at all. It should have been made, the ice cream should have been ready by then. So she said, so she started naming the things that could be wrong. I'd forgotten to put the paddle in the pot, in the thing, so it didn't have anything moving it. And so it made my mother laugh so much. So I was thinking sometimes when we do these things stupidly, it will help other people sometimes too. It helps them in a certain way. According to the circumstances, it could help them in various ways.
Absolutely. And patience is a virtue.
Yes.
You know, we know that. We're taught that from
Yes.
Scripture, and we're taught it in life. And so impatience needs to be overcome.
Yes.
We need to really be cautious of it.
Do you think it's cheating? I carry a book in my purse all the time, and if I ever have to wait, then I pull out the book and start reading, or a little booklet. And I don't know if that's cheating or not, because
I think it's a good method. And the method is to be able to respond in a positive or affirmative way to what are potentially impatient experiences. And if we do find ourselves being impatient, then deciding what it is we can do to eliminate that.
Yes. I love your idea of praying and meditating while you're on hold on the telephones, because those can drive you crazy.
And if we did it, with so many people would be praying.
Yes.
I mean, it's a tremendous opportunity. And I think, too, as we create these little pockets for prayer, so often now in New Thought, metaphysical Christian philosophy, we believe, of course, as I expressed in the talk, about beholding the Christ in people.
Yes.
But very fundamental to our faith. And I think even those who are really good truth students need to be reminded, and that's coming back to the basics that you and I were talking about before the program. People need to be reminded, both in the movement and outside the movement, that we really need to spend time connecting and blessing people.
Yes.
I really need, when I'm standing in the grocery line, to be aware that there are 4 people in front of me. I don't know them. I don't know what their problems are. I don't know what they're facing. And I don't need to. I'm not going to psychoanalyze them, and I'm certainly not going to evangelize them, because we don't believe in evangelization. But what I can do is offer prayer for all those people.
Yes.
What I can do is behold the Christ in them. What I can do is ask for peace and prosperity and health for them. What I can do is thank that checker for what she's doing for me, and thank that box person, because the box people tend to be young people. They could be out doing any number of things, but they've chosen to be productive, and they've chosen to be productive and be of service to us.
Yeah.
The little exercise that I had at the print shop is one that I learned long ago when someone suggested to me that every time we hear a siren, we should pray. And as a matter of fact, it was an aunt that I had, and she used to say, whenever we hear a siren, and as a little boy, I can remember this, and she was a devoutly traditional religious person. She said, every time we hear a siren, we pray out loud for the person, for the people. And that's a wonderful thing. Now, of course, there are situations where you don't want to pray out loud, because bursting into spontaneous prayer can sometimes create difficulty, but we can always enter into a moment of prayer.
Yes.
And what it does for us mentally, and what it does for us spiritually, and what it does for us from a centering and peaceful standpoint, what it does for us from a healing standpoint, because every time we send the presence and power of God out to other people, so often in the church on Sunday morning as we're singing the opening hymn, my thoughts, I think most people would say that they'd be asking God to guide and direct them, but I don't do that, because I believe God guides and directs us all the time. I begin to pray for the needs of the people in the congregation, and the fact that their needs will be met, and that their need will be met by what's happening at the service, and not necessarily by what I say, but by something, by a song, by a prayer, by a time with someone. And those remembrances and prayers about and for other people are tremendously important.
And it works, because I've never heard you say that before, that you pray for the people during that time. But everyone always, so many people say, he spoke to me personally. I don't know how he could think of I don't know how Dr. Costello could know what I'm thinking or what I'm facing, because he spoke to my need this morning. And 16 people might say that on the same morning, and they all have different needs. And so your prayer is answered.
Yeah, and it's interesting that as we speak, for instance, in a Sunday service, how the words that we use, and it's true not only from the pulpit, it's true in our daily lives, and it's true for lay people as well as ministers. I mean, some people believe that churches are so holy and pious, where in fact the world is a spiritual experience. And so as we share with each other and as we pray for each other, it doesn't matter who we are, what our position is, wonderful things begin to happen because we connect.
Exactly, and prayers go out as light. We say that at our church very often. Prayers go out as light. We know that it does clairvoyantly. You can see that they do. And so we're creating light. We're really being co-creators with God,
Mhm.
eternal God. That's a lovely thing and a lovely thought, that we can use our time in that productive way and know that those are being used.
Absolutely. And this issue of impatience, I think, comes a lot from what's happened to society. And we try not to be negative about what's going on in the world because we believe there are more positive things going on in the world than negative things,
Yeah.
which is a different view than most people would take.
Yeah.
But we really do wholeheartedly believe that good and wonderful things are happening, and that as those good and wonderful things happen, if we give up our impatience and if we let things take their natural course, that more good will come and more good will be manifest and will be expressed in life.
And the change will be positive, because we know we're living in the time of greatest change the world has ever known. So we can't expect things to not be happening to cause us to be impatient. But if we do, as you said, transmute that impatience into good, then it all works together for the good.
Mm-hmm. And then our preoccupation with material things, I think, detracts from our patience.
Yes.
Because we want material things now.
Yeah.
And we have a mechanism in most cases where we can have them. We can buy on the installment plan.
Yeah.
We can have the technology. We can have the cars. We can have the houses. We can have the trips. We can have all of those sorts of things. And there's nothing bad about that. But it does breed within us an impatience. And all of us have experienced the fact of seeing someone who maybe got a job or got a position a little bit before they should have, before the maturity was there.
Yeah.
And if there had been a little more patience, then maybe they and their surroundings would have been considerably different. Now, we do believe that divine order is always being made manifest, and so there are no mistakes. So as people go at breakneck speed and are impatient, we believe that there is a purpose for that. But we also believe that we have a choice, and that if we can simply cultivate within ourselves and others, making the choice to be patient
Yes.
and to use our time prudently and responsibly and in a pious and holy and spiritual way, then good things can happen.
Yes, again, it's transmutation. And another way to relax is just deep breathing. Before we pray, we can just do our deep breathing, inhaling deeply and exhaling slowly.
Mm-hmm.
Makes a big difference because it changes our body. It curtails the impatience.
And I think that is key. If we begin to see ourselves or feel impatient,
Mm-hmm.
if we begin to build on negativity, then that's as a indication to us that we need to center, we need to step back.
Yes.
We need to
Detach.
There's another analogy that I read recently that I thought was very good, and I didn't get much into it, and I want to talk about it in church some Sunday soon. But it really was written by a psychologist who was talking about creating and determining the weather by the way that you feel.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, if you're happy, then it's a sunny day.
Yeah.
It's a blue sky day. It's clouds. If you're grumpy, then maybe it's a little shower. If you're really in the doldrums and deep in depression, it's a full-blown storm. And so you equate your psychological and spiritual well-being with the weather, and you want to constantly look at the weather when you get up, when you get to work, at the middle of the day, in the afternoon. And I think that's a good way for us to be able to sensitize ourselves and then begin to detach from that negativity.
Yes. Well, to detach and release is the key, I think, don't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're so taught not to release.
Yes.
We're so taught not to release.
Yeah.
People don't want to release things. People
That's
don't
right.
want to release people. People don't want to release the way they do things. And really, one of the greatest lessons that we can have is to detach, as we say, detach and rise.
Yeah.
Because if you detach from the circumstance, if I detach, which is what I did in that grocery line,
Yeah.
which is what I did in that
Exactly.
parking lot, I detached and I rose.
Yeah.
And by rising, I simply mean that I stepped out of that situation and stepped into something more peaceful and more productive.
Yeah. And release the negativity in every case.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a marvelous lesson. Sometimes we just need to remember to remind ourselves, detach.
Detach.
Just a personal reminder, self-reminder, is often necessary, and we can do that.
Why do you think it is that most people have such difficulty detaching?
Well, I think it's human nature just to cling to. It's part of the staying with the past and dreading the future. It's part of not being in present time.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're in present time, those things don't have meaning to us. Material things don't have meaning to us because we're in present time. We don't have the attachment.
And it's an issue, I guess, of security and an issue of control.
Mm-hmm.
But when we find out that we detach and rise, we now are in perfect control, because we're united with the power and the grace of God.
Yes.
And so we don't need to control. And our security is assured, and we're not capable of providing for our own security. I mean, every one of us knows that. We live from payday to payday, or we live from time to time, and in every circumstance, we're going to pass away.
Exactly.
You know, that's, as you know, I remind people in the church of
Yeah.
that every day. We're not going to get out of life alive.
Yes.
I mean, and so the idea is we have to prepare for that transition and understand that it's simply a transition.
Yes, and again, that's the biggest change that we'll ever face. But it's could be the most glorious. It's how we face it is the key to how we go over.
And whether we're patient in the process.
Yes.
Some people's transition takes a long time.
Exactly.
Some people have long, protracted illnesses.
And
pain. Other people have short illnesses. Some people are taken out immediately. And it's the same with the life experiences. Some people have years of difficulty. And yet, in the years of adversity, we know many people who live beautifully in that adversity.
Yes.
And we know other people who are destroyed by the adversity.
Yes. Well, in the West, we seem to be more taken with this idea of denying pain, denying illness. And in the East, they don't. And they go out very fully. And they go out in full consciousness. And that's the ideal, of course. But if we could just remember that everything happens according to God's own plan, but God's plan is determined by our attitude toward what we do, then we'd be more able to face adversity and take the self-responsibility for it.
And that's tremendously important to understand that premise and that philosophy, that tenet.
That we have to take our own self-responsibility. It's not God's will. He gave us free will, and so we make our own decisions. But if we can stay detached and just live in present time, that would be the major thing. What else would you think would be helpful?
Well, I think that would be the primary way to be able to claim patience in life and to give up the impatience that we have. And Reverend Freelander and I have been discussing with you concepts and ideas in becoming a patient person. We hope that you found this useful and interesting. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Dynamic power helps me be strong. Confident living comforts my heart. From such a blessing I can't depart. Confident living helps me expand visions of value, the kingdom at hand. Confident living, talent to win, gift of the Spirit moves from within.